Alright, I want to come up with parametric equations for a curve that I don't really necessarily know where it came from. It's not necessarily cycloid, not necessarily a spirograph kind of thing. It turns out this is, but I don't want to rely on the fact that I'm looking at a circle rolling around another circle. Just look at the curve and see if I can come up with parametric equations. Okay, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to look individually at the x-coordinate and the y-coordinate. So I'm going to look at a graph of x versus t, and when I'm done, I'm going to look at a graph of y versus t. Once I have those graphs, I'm going to see if I can come up with equations for those graphs. Okay. First of all, I need to generate those graphs. So I need to pick a starting point. That is, I need to pick a point when my parameter is equal to 0. And there's really 4 places that work pretty well here. I'm going to start here. The thing is, this point right here is at the biggest the x value ever gets, and it's in the middle of the range that the y value ever gets. Now, this is a fairly symmetric curve, but so it really isn't going to matter which point I start at, as long as I pick one of those. I don't want to start at some random point necessarily. I just pick something that looks kind of nice. So here we go. I'm going to look just at the x-coordinate. Well, this one, it looks like the x-coordinate starts off up here at 10. Okay, so I'm up at 10. And then what happens? Well, I need to pick a direction that I'm going to fly in. So I'm going to start at 10, and I'm going to go, let's just say, upwards. Okay, so I'm going to rotate around this thing counterclockwise here. So it starts at 10, and the x-coordinate is getting smaller. Initially you might say, oh, it's getting bigger, but don't focus on the y. Focus on just the left and right aspect of it. So this is moving to the left, still moving to the left, still moving to the left. There's a point right over here where it's as far left as it's going to go, and then it starts back up, headed to the right. So the x-coordinate keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it gets down to some value in here, right? And then it starts getting bigger again up until it gets maybe up to here, right? So it goes down, then it comes back up again, and then it drops back down to 0, and then it drops down below 0, right? Drops down here. X value gets bigger again up to there, then it drops all the way down to -10, and then it comes back up. It goes back down, right? Goes back up, goes back down, comes up to 0, and then climbs up to about there, goes back down again, and then climbs back up to 10, right? So the whole thing that the x-coordinate did started at 10. Let's see if I can do this. Started at 10, drops down, back up, all the way down to here. That would be this point now. Then it climbs back up again a little bit, drops all the way down to 10, -10, climbs back up to here, goes back down to there, climbs up to 0, climbs all the way up to here, back down a little bit, and then up, back up to 10. Right? That's what the x-coordinate does. I haven't paid any attention to the y-coordinate, but that's what the x-coordinate does. Now, I'm going to do the y-coordinate. So whatever that one was, it took a certain amount of time or a certain amount of values of the parameter. The same amount of time or the same values of the parameter, the y-coordinate is going to do something. Well, what does the y-coordinate do? The y-coordinate is right here, starts at 0, right? And then because we're flying this way, the y-coordinate starts getting bigger. It climbs up to about this point right here. Then it comes back down to about that point right there. So the y-coordinate starts there, climbs up to about here, goes back down again, then climbs all the way up to 10. And it gets to 10 at the same time the x-coordinate got to 0. So I'm just trying to line things up a little bit. So down, up, and it came up to 10 about the same time that did, right? Now what's happening? I'm just focusing on the y-coordinate, right? I go up to here, down to there, back up to there. Now it kind of comes back down in the same way. It comes down, up, down to 0. So it goes down, up, down to 0. And it's down to 0. The y-coordinate is 0 and the x-coordinate was at -10. So I'm trying to line this up so that this is at 0 and that's at negative 10. These graphs aren't particularly nice, but that's okay. I'm just trying to get a rough idea of what's happening so I can see what's the x doing, what's the y doing. If I had to walk this with my feet, this is what my feet would have to do. This is what the up and down, what my hand has to do. Right? So what have I done? I've done up, down, up, 0, headed negative, then back up again. So headed negative, back up a little bit, and then back down to negative 10. And again, I get to negative 10 when the x-coordinate was at 0. And then I climb back up and then dip down a little bit and back to 0 at the end there, right? While x is doing one thing, y is doing something else. In order to parameterize a curve when I don't know it ahead of time, I've got to look at it and say, focus just on the x. Watch what the x is doing. So I notice my pen is pointing up and down so that I'm sort of crossing the x-axis. So I'm seeing where this is crossing the x-axis at any point. Crosses it at 10, goes down to something, comes back up a little bit, gets up back to 0 here, then it start doing negatives, right? So I'm looking at what the x-coordinate is doing. Then I go and I look for the y's. Okay, now I'm holding my pen this way so that I can see how far up and down I'm moving. I'm not really focusing on moving sideways. How far up, back down a little bit, way up, down some, up, down, up, down, up, down, right? So I'm looking at that y coordinate and plotting that here. Okay. The next goal is to come up with the equations for these graphs, and we will do that in the next video.